Hello and welcome to another edition of the Irish Angle on Jump to It. As usual, I have Johnny Ward and Emma Nagle here, and we're going to look at all things that happened in racing last week, which mainly is the Grand National at Aintree. So lots to talk about. Johnny, Emma, welcome to the show.
How are you, Vinny?
Thanks, Vincent.
Right, start off protests. That's the big thing, isn't it? It has to be the big story. What did you make of it, Johnny? We know that these people are a fringe group, but there was a lot of them turned up at Aintree and they nearly caused the Grand National not to go ahead.
Yeah, this was forecast, obviously, Vinny, and I suppose the numbers maybe were a little bit of a surprise to me, and the delay of the race, which may or may not have resulted in the death of one of the horses in the Grand National, just because he was quite wound up. Sandy Thompson's horse, who didn't have any history, as you wrote in your blog today, of essentially even falling in races, not to mind, reaching the fatality that he did. And I did a small bit of digging into the animal welfare group, and if you look at what its stated aims are, it's fighting for animal justice, fighting for climate justice. I think that the two issues are utterly exceptionally important, and also I think as humans we've generally really let down other species in this world. We've created a climate now where there has been a mass extinction of species. There have been a lot of issues in biodiversity that have been catastrophic, and the climate is really, really bad. It's really, really bad. So the guys that are protesting on behalf of this, I would completely respect what they're protesting about. I think we treat animals as means to an end in order to eat them, really, and we might like pets and all that, and that's a bit different, but the food chain is quite sick, really, when you look at it from top to bottom around the world. What animals are bred to do, which is basically end up in our stomach and be kind of killed whenever it suits us, and it's quite grim, right? So all of this stuff, I think, if you had a poll among every other species in the morning, maybe two of them might vote to retain humans, and they'd be dogs and horses, right? And the rest, including cats, because they're too clever, would vote us out, because we're basically a bad influence in every other species, give or take. Horses, I'm not so sure about, because horses are really well looked after in yards, and we breed them obviously for sport. Any yard I visit, and any time I'm around a horse in a yard, I mean, when I was at Gordon Elliott's a couple of weeks ago, he sent out Silver Birch and Tiger Roll into the show ring and the sand ring, and they just leapt around. They were as happy as Larry. They were full of the joys of life. Silver Birch at the age of 27 or whatever. And I see how well horses are looked after in stable yards. They're looked after incredibly well. And what the protests were protesting against, I think on Saturday, is so utterly ridiculous in terms of where racing is in the ladder of the wrongs that are committed against animals. I really think they have no idea what they're doing. Maybe they do know what they're doing because they got publicity for their cause. I respect their right to protest, but I basically think they're quite idiotic in what they did on Saturday, and they probably caused more deaths than they saved.
Okay. Well, I agree with you largely in a lot of that. What the question I have with all of this is, what do we do going forward? We have a group of people, maybe a very, very small minority of the population, but they're vocal, they're active, and they're protesting. So what do we do going forward to try and counteract this? Because obviously, as you say, they're misinformed is the first thing. So why haven't we been informing them about what the story is with the industry, how the industry works, the improvements that have been made in the industry over recent generations? I see that only coming out yesterday is Julie Harrington, the head of the BHA, saying that there's a third less fatalities in horse racing than there was 20 years ago. Well, that's information I didn't know. That's the information that these people obviously don't know. Why are we not promoting that more than just the economic impact of racing, which we see every other day in Ireland? We're constantly told, oh, Punchestown brings in X amount of million to the economy. Galway does the same, that we employ 12,000 odd people in rural areas, all that sort of stuff, which is great from an economic point of view. But there's a whole other side to this, that horse racing is not the cruel sport that these people see it to be, and yet they don't know that. So, Emma, what do you think? Do we really need to educate these people? Do we need to educate everybody and get that message out there?
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that. I mean, I think anyone who's been kind of following the Stand Up for Racing, which came out in the last week or two, I mean, they've made some like brilliant arguments. I saw Kevin Blake and Richard Hoyles go on mainstream media stations and totally shut down the arguments that were put ahead by this Animal Rising group.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I mean, when their points are counteracted with actual facts from racing professionals, they absolutely have no leg to stand on, and I think that's something that racing needs to recognize. You know, we need to be confident in the sport, and HRI and the BHA should be backing the Stand Up for Racing now. I'm sure they probably will be in the future, but as you mentioned, you know, maybe they should have been doing it a long time ago rather than waiting to be reactive rather than proactive. But like, I'm pretty confident in the sport we have, and that, you know, there's some great people to articulate how good it is for the animals. And Johnny made some great points there. I mean, like, there's no better life for a horse than they are getting in the racing yards. I mean, there's maybe other equine disciplines that could learn a bit from racing with the care that they get. I mean, just talking from a personal perspective here, I mean, a lot of these people, they're branding the point that they want to release the horses into the wild to roam free, which is just absolutely ridiculous. I think the lifespan of a wild horse is about half that of a horse who is domesticated and being cared for. I mean, these horses would not survive if it wasn't for the care they're getting in the yards. So look, I think racing needs to be confident, and they need to be proactive from here on in promoting the sport and educating, because I think if anyone is educated on the facts of the whole matter, I don't think that they will be standing on the side of this Animal Rising group. And I saw a few kind of worrying tweets over the weekend from kind of public figures branding facts here and there, kind of half facts, but there's kind of very emotional language, and they were most of them now, in fairness, were interacted with by people from racing, and a lot of the tweets were actually deleted once there was more facts presented to them, which, you know, is something that racing needs to do. We just need to present the facts as they are, and I think then we can be pretty confident to stand on our own two legs with it.
Yeah, I have to say that I was, as Johnny mentioned earlier, I was shocked by the number of people who actually turned up to protest. Now, there's definitely a case for saying the publicity they got in the week ahead of the National by going on national broadcasting in the UK got them an awful lot more people turning up. There's no question about that. But at the same time, there's a significant number of these people, and racing as a sport can't really defend itself against any number of people. Like we just talked about off air before we came on, we've got Tremor on today. If, for argument's sake, a handful of people went to Tremor, how many would it take to stop Tremor going ahead? Probably 2 or 3 with a little bit of super glue, and we're done. That's the end of it. So we can't defend ourselves against people who are going to take these active protests to the race meetings. So there has to be another solution to this if we're going to look at horse racing continuing on for generations to come, which hopefully it will. So in the similar guise as well. So we don't want to have to make too many changes either. I think they've already made some significant changes to make horse racing a safer sport, both for the riders and for the equine participants as well. But obviously they may have to make some more tweaks to this at some point. People are certainly talking about the number of horses in the Grand National at 40 may have to be reduced at some stage. I don't think the fences themselves are a particular issue, because you only have to look at some of them. Like they're very easily jumped. There's no major problem for a national hunt horse to jump those fences. The issue is that obviously when we get a high profile meeting like the Grand National where horses do die, that is a big issue for the sport going forward. So Johnny, you mentioned that about Hill 16, the horse who unfortunately passed away after a first fence fall. That horse had got hyper in the preliminaries. There were a lot more fallers at the first 2 fences this year than there have been in any recent years since the modifications were made to the fences. So there's something caused more horses to fall at those first 2 fences this year. Perhaps it was those Animal Rising people, the fact that they delayed the race for such a length of time, because the race itself was off 15 minutes late, but at the same time there were protests going on for probably a good half an hour or so. So there were horses weren't in the position they should have been, as in they were being held walking around parade rings and everything for a longer period than they should have been, and so on. So you'd wonder what effect that really did have, and there's no doubt that there's a danger to the horses, the jockeys, and to the public if we're getting thoroughbreds highly upset in advance of a race. So we really got to stop this thing happening, don't we, Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to their Instagram account, they're like, you know, we're heartbroken at the death of such a horse and all this. You're not heartbroken, because you basically caused all these ructions on Saturday, and you caused all these delays for horses who are athletes. They're trained to run in a very demanding race, and I'm sure all these people were crying on Saturday night at the death of another horse. I'm sure they really, really took it to heart, because I actually doubt they were able to sleep because another horse died, and I'm sure they really are genuine about that, or not, because they don't know what they're doing here. And like, Vinny, we can have a 2 mile flat race here if we want, and just go down that route. Like, I cycle on Saturday, despite the fact I'm not fit. I hit 65 kilometers an hour, for example. I've had bad crashes going around a bend. Larkin Wire, who's we all know Larkin Wire is a really good cyclist. We cycle knowing that there are serious dangers involved. That's part of the trail. Racing has to involve a little bit of danger. And I mean, how many race weekends have we had called off since I got into racing 20 years ago? I can't remember. I can remember an IRA bomb scare, but I can remember very little else. So I really wouldn't be that worried about these guys. I mean, it is a fringe group. We have massive issues with climate justice and with animal welfare. Racing is way down the list here. And I know we need to educate people, but honestly, I think if we spend 6 months indoctrinating the 100-odd people that were there on Saturday, I'm not sure we'd get very far. And to be honest, I'm not really that worried about them.
Okay, that's fair enough. Right, we'll move on and look at the racing itself from Aintree. There was lots of great performances. Starting off on Thursday, we had Banbridge, Irish winner, Joseph O'Brien. We'd Zenta, which won a short head from Bow Zenith. We'd Shishkin, which was an absolute revelation to me, and then Constitution Hill. What did you make of those four, Emma? Anything in particular strike you there?
Banbridge, I thought, was very impressive. Got a lovely positive ride, and it's kind of a win that he kind of threatened to do for a while. He's ground, I suppose, maybe in the slightly softer side on the day, but he put in a lovely performance there, I think. After that, we had Zenta in the juvenile hurdle. Look, she showed an awful lot of promise when she was second or third in the Triumph. Boosted that form again. Another one for Willie Mullins, I suppose. Another top juvenile. Very well fancied. And Shishkin probably was the highlight of the day, though. Well, maybe Constitution Hill, but I think Shishkin, for me, we kind of knew Constitution Hill would do it. But Shishkin stepping up to 3 miles, he really put on a show. Proving he stayed. I felt a bit bad for Ahoy Senior. He ran probably one of the races of his life, in fairness, and he was just pinned on the line by probably just the better horse. Saw Brian Hughes getting a bit of flack for the ride. Don't agree with that whatsoever. I thought he got on brilliantly with the horse. Absolutely, probably one of his best performances. Just got unlucky to meet Shishkin on the day, I suppose. And looking forward to Shishkin now next season. King George, maybe Gold Cup. He looks like he's going to stay the 3 mile too now. He was doing nothing but staying at the finish there. So yeah, he's an exciting one for next year now. Again, it's great to see him back. I had a lot of doubts about the horse now, in fairness, but look, maybe he did actually just need the trip, and he's kind of proven that does now.
Yeah, I still have doubts about him. Even haven't seen what he did the other day. I don't know what it is about him that he's an enigma. It looks like he'll stay a Gold Cup trip by the look of it. It looks he'll only improve over distance. He could even be a Grand National horse at one stage. What do you make of him, Johnny Shishkin? He was a revelation.
He was and he wasn't. Like, I think, Aptutard, I thought Aptutard was a 6-4 shot in that race. I thought, because he just had to literally run his race and goal or thereabouts. I think he wins this race, and he ran so badly. I mean, he looked absolutely out on his feet coming into the straight. So then Shishkin basically had to beat Ahoy Senior, who, with all due respect, isn't within the Nass's Roar win the Gold Cup. He's miles off that standard. He beat him by a length and a half, basically because Ahoy Senior stopped to nothing, as far as I'm concerned. So Shishkin, I do think it opens up a few interesting debates, though, Vinny. Like, I was trying to think of Ted Walsh's horse, who won the graded race at Naas and then finished placed in the Grand National under Katie. I don't know if you remember the name of the horse. He was Galway owned, but see, I'll remember now. Seabass, sorry, Seabass. Yeah, I was talking about Seabass yesterday, but not the horse. But like, sometimes we get too pigeonholed with horses in terms of trip, and Shishkin was nearly all his career over 2 miles. And like, it obviously shows that he's quite effective at the very least over 3 miles. And maybe sometimes I think trainers should be a little bit more versatile with their horses over various trips. But I don't know. I'm a bit with you, Vinny. I'd still have reservations. I think Aptutard was 2 stone below his best here, and he beat a Hoy Senior a length and a half. Hoy Senior basically stopped to nothing, so I think he more or less won by default. Constitution Hill, I mean, I would love to see him going over fences, because I think otherwise he'll just be kind of boring in the hurling division. But yeah, he's an amazing horse. He probably wasn't overly impressive in terms of a 3-length victory over Sharjah, but he'd plenty in hand.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Constitution Hill again. Look, obviously he is just different class to everything else out there, and I had thought he sticks over hurdles is the obvious thing to do. The owner is inclined to think, let's try him over fences. He's due to school over fences in the next week or two to see what he's going to do for next season. But the more I saw him the other day, the more I think he has to go over fences. There is nothing left for him to prove over hurdles. He has to go chasing from my mind, and I think I'll really look forward to next season knowing he's going novice chasing. It would be fabulous. And
I'm
then
going to
with Gold
contradict
Cups to
myself
come.
though here. That is he two
Go
miles or
on.
a Gold Cup horse? What would you do?
I
I
don't
wouldn't
know.
be
Actually,
convinced
look.
he's so good.
Neither am I.
Yeah, when you
Yeah.
look at Shishkin, he could be anything,
No
couldn't he? Could be any distance.
Constitution.
Yeah. Yeah, I look. He's a point-to-point horse as well, so there's no reason why he isn't going to stay a lot further than 2 miles. So be interesting to see where he does go and what happens. But I'd really like to see him go over fences. The other thing you talk about there is horses over trips and the change of trips. I was really surprised to see two horses that ran in the Grand National, Durasso and A Wave of the Sea. I don't know what the idea was there, to be honest with you. Like, surely that's something that I was happy with. I must say, from the Grand National point of view, with the horses that there were a lot of horses that were involved in the finish. We had the likes of Vanillier and Gaillard de Menil, and the other horse that finished fifth, whose name is gone off the top of my head at the minute. But
The
the
big
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 dog.
dog,
dog. Yeah. Born
all
by the
all
Sea
real
finished sixth though,
staying
Vinny. To be
types.
fair,
What?
but you're talking about a Wave to See. He finished ninth,
No,
like, so it wasn't a terrible run, I
yeah,
suppose.
no, not terrible, beaten a long way. But at the same time, you just feel that you like to think that if you study form, which I do, and you go through the ratings and all the different things, you have to say that trip is an important factor when you're evaluating a race, and you like to think that when you see a race that's 4 miles 2 furlongs, you need a horse who's going to be one that wants that trip and wants to stay. So it just throws it a bit up in the air when you see the likes of A Wave of the Sea and Durasso going into those sort of races. And I was happy to see that the horses who I knew were out and out stayers were the ones that were involved at the finish, which was great to see. Um, Moving on quickly, we go to Friday. We had Jerry Kalam and In the Pocket. They were the two big ones for me. Jerry Kalam, Emma, you've had a soft spot for this fella all the time. He was brilliant.
Yeah, I'm a massive Jerry Clown fan. And in fairness, I think he's probably looking like a horse now. He's going to get better and better kind of as time goes by. I think he stepped up an awful lot in his Cheltenham performance, and he just looked a lot more polished, a lot more professional. Look, I know it was probably a weak grade one realistically, like when you're looking through the field, but he couldn't have done a whole pile more. Brilliant to see Davy as well back with a grade one winner before he bowed out again on Saturday evening. But look, Jerry Clown, he's horse I really, really like. Looking forward to seeing how he transitions into open company next year. Like, he's kind of a real old fashioned chaser, the real kind of, I suppose, your typical Gold Cup horse, maybe like a Denman kind of horse, just a galloper, a remorseless kind of galloper. Whether he'll be the quality for a Gold Cup next year with the likes of Gallop and Deschamps around, not 100% sure, but it'll be interesting to see how he can step up. And look, he's definitely a solid chaser for Gordon next year, and probably one that he needs. He doesn't have too many really top quality open company horses at the moment, but I think Jerry Clom might fill that gap for him next year.
Yeah, good stuff. Davy, that's another thing, Johnny, isn't it? Davy gone again. When will he come back again? Could be for Punchestown, would it? What do you think?
Yeah, there's a scene in the Coen Brothers, their last movie, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, where this outlaw he gets sentenced to death twice, and the first time he gets away with it, and the second time he's waiting to be hung, and he turns around to the fella beside him, he starts crying. He said, "Oh, it's only your first time," because he had actually been sentenced twice. So Davy, I think, Davy, if you see the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But Davy, I think this is it. But in fairness, like I mentioned Gordon and that trip to the yard. I think Gordon was right in that he didn't really want Davy to bow out on that Cheltenham, and maybe people will remember that Cheltenham as much as the Aintree that followed. But for Davy to have, the likes of Jerry Calam, and that for me was great. And I thought he was quite interesting speaking about Michael O'Leary and the reference to his family, and like I could see where Davy was coming from there. And I'm fascinated as to what Davy is going to do now. I think he's a really, really deep character, really intriguing character, and I was delighted he went out in Jerry Calam. I had a big bet on Jerry Calam at Cheltenham, and didn't really feel unlucky on the day, but I don't know, maybe he was a little bit better at Aintree. I know it was a weaker race, as Emma says, but he never looked like being beaten. He was extremely well backed as well, and I think he is a Gold Cup horse next season. I definitely be naming him that way. He's going to be more or less at his peak as an 8-year-old, stays really well, and yeah, I'd have him well up there next season in terms of the narrative.
Yeah, I like him too. And then Saturday, what have we got? Irish Point, Sire de Burley, and then the big one, Corrick Rambler. Emma, what did you make of those? Particularly Sire de Burley.
Yeah,
That was one for me. I couldn't believe that again.
Yeah, I suppose to start the day off, Irish Point, another one for Davy. He got the 2 Grade 1 winners, which was great. And like it was, we talked about in the pocket as well on Friday. Like it was another boost for the Murray National for him. Like 2 horses he's after beating now have won 2 big races in Aintree. So he's the supreme form is looking very, very strong on the back of that. But yeah, look, it was kind of good race planning, I think, by Gordon sending Jerry Colomb and the name is Irish Point, sorry, over for these two Grade 1s, because he's kind of nearly avoiding the Mullins Battalion at Punchestown while picking up Grade 1s on the way. So look, it was great planning by Gordon, in fairness, to get the 2 for Robcore as well. They had a great time of it at Aintree, but. Yeah, John Bon as well on the Saturday. He was impressive, kind of for a second I thought he might have been in a little bit of trouble, but I think he's probably more of a stayer than a speed horse in my eyes. Anyway, I'd be surprised if he didn't maybe step up for a Ryanair or something like that next year. I don't really see him as a champion chase horse in open company. And then, of course, you have the national, Sire de Burley you were mentioning as well, sorry, yeah. An old enigma, isn't he? It was actually interesting. Gordon interviewed before the race, and he said we'd know after a couple of hurdles how he's going to run, but he was wrong on that one anyway, because after a few hurdles, you would have thought he would have pulled up. But he just flew home. An older horse really enjoying the game. It was great to see him get another win, in fairness. And then we lead into the national, I suppose, which, to be honest, I was never a massive fan of the national myself. Look, I've nothing against it, but it's not the highlight of the racing calendar for me.
You're not from Tommy Ames yet,
no? No. It's not the highlight for me. It was I found it a bit difficult to watch, to be honest. It was a bit messy at the start, and like as we mentioned, I do think that the delays led up to it. I think, look, I know there's been loads of changes made to the national. I think they need to do something about the first fence, though, and I think they need to talk to the jockeys about that one, about how they can make it a bit safer, because I think like the fences are small enough as they are. I think they're probably going maybe a bit too fast over the fences at the moment, which is causing the issue. But I think they need to discuss with the jockeys, is there something they can do to kind of make things a bit easier over the first 2, because obviously the tension builds up, and it was added to the jockeys had to wait in the weigh room and all this and that. But yeah. But look, after it all kind of calmed down a bit, like Corrick Rambler, what a performance he put in. £10 well in, and in fairness, it was good to see the kind of the form book be justified, I suppose. And I thought Derek Fox gave him a very brave ride. He was down the inner the whole time, and yeah, what a horse. I was actually surprised. I was looking back through his form, and he actually won a 6-year-old plus novice riders point to point before he was bought by Lucinda Russell. So kind of not the conventional route to a Grand National, you'd say, but yeah, what a horse. Cheltenham winner, Grand National winner, and look, you have to be very impressed by him, in fairness.
Yeah, bought for small money too. Also interesting to see that there's a young guy involved in the syndicate who only got involved in racing during the lockdown, and he goes and gets himself a Grand National winner. It's unbelievable, Johnny, isn't it? That's your dream, is it?
Yeah, I'm actually a bit like Emma now. It's not the race that I wouldn't have the interest in it. I would have another race at all. But to be fair, I was kind of almost happy in a way that it didn't go to Ireland, that Britain could have a big winner of the race, because I think Corrick Rambler was the only one in the betting in the first sort of, did you say Vinny last week, though, one in the top 14,
10 or something. I think
British
the
trained.
Milos was the only other one. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, he was well in. I fancied the other horse by Jeremy, Ain't That a Shame, but I was worried about his stamina, and he 100% did not get home. He stopped to absolutely nothing. But Corrick Rambler, you always thought, like I was looking at the betting and run, he was always trading pretty short, and that was understandable, because you were expecting him to finish. For all that, I think up the running he was tying up a little bit. He just had so much to spare at that stage. He was probably at the end of his stamina demand at that stage. But it was a great performance, and straight after the race, I prefer to remember after race Derek Fox, who could be absolutely going mad after winning the Grand National, and feeling all about himself and how great he is. What Derek Fox was worried about wasn't the fools who were protesting beforehand and all that, was actually the horse, and pouring water on his head to cool him down. So he was worried about the horse's welfare. I thought that was a very poignant moment as well. As for the rest of Aintree on the day, yeah, Sire de Burley, I mean, I do think the counterpoint to what you're saying about Gordon bringing the horse over to Aintree, said, I do worry for Punchestown how dominant Willie's going to be. Like, I guess it is what it is, but I think Willie's kind of left his main eggs in the basket for Punchestown at this stage. I feel just looking at Fairyhouse and even Mallow last weekend, he's going to absolutely dominate. But yeah, delighted for Gordon to have those winners. And as I say, Gordon had Davy Russell rather to go out in a high as well.
I think after Punchestown, the industry will be glad that we have Banks races there, because they're the only ones he ain't going to win. Willie is going to win everything when we go there. Wait till you see. It'll be race after race after race of Willie 1, 2, 3. Anyway, we'll move on. We've looked at all of that. There was one other thing I thought was interesting over the weekend, just from a racing point of view, was that the Curragh Point Lonsdale coming back. That was great to see. A horse who was injured in the Guineas last year, only had the one run last year. He looks like a proper horse. Great comeback win in the alleged stakes. So I think we'll have a lot to see from him over the rest of the season, hopefully. And then we pick each a horse we saw during the week that we think might be one for our viewers to follow. Johnny, have you one for me?
I'm going to give one that was actually, it's nearly a week ago now. It ran at Dundalk, and I'm kind of borrowing this off Fran Berry, who was seemed a great effect on racing TV yesterday, buying a couple of ice creams for Gary O'Brien. But I was texting Fran on the night. He put up this Bodicea Bell Tuesday at Dundalk under Jamie Powell. Jamie's a terrific young talent. I think he's a splendid jockey to make him, but this is not a ride he'll want to look back on again. And this filly was stepping back to a mile, having been run over the mile and 2, and it kind of looked like it would suit her. She was very weak in the betting. I have to say, I really enjoy Fran on Racing TV. He's very candid. He was like, I backed this horse at 7s this morning. It's 14s now. I hope I'm on guaranteed odds, and not afraid to take the piss out of himself. This horse should have won at least 2 or 3 lengths. It only ended up finishing 3rd. And I'd be all over it wherever it runs next. So yeah, we've a Grand National podcast, and I'm giving you a horse there, friend, in a 0 to 60 at Dundalk.
Yeah, I'm going to give one that ran on the flat as well, but there you go. Emma, have you one first then?
Yeah, I'm going to give one that ran in Tramore yesterday. Noble Talent. We actually trained him ourselves, and I thought he ran a stormer. He absolutely flew home in the opportunity maiden hurdle. He's a horse who'll probably relish 3 miles, and if he steps up to it, I think he'll be a very fun horse to follow. He should win plenty of races.
Great stuff. I'm going to pick one from another small yard, a horse called Improving. Austin Leahy. They had a little bit of a punt on this in the Curragh yesterday in an apprentice handicap over 6, back from 50s into 12s. The problem was, the first thing for me was I'd seen the gamble on it, and I knew the horse. I'd watched it run a number of times. It needs bottomless ground. That's the first thing. So it was getting that in the Curragh. The other thing is, I think it needs 7 furlongs rather than 6. I think it's better over just that extra furlong. So that was one thing against it. But the other one was the main problem for them was it reared up leaving stalls, which didn't help. And it was beaten just over 2 lengths. I think there's a day in it. Be one to watch maybe when it comes out. That was his first run for 5 months. So if you see that turning up in the next week or 2 on heavy ground over 7, do have something each way in it. Look, thanks guys for your contributions today. And thank you everyone for watching. And make sure to sign up to our channel, subscribe there on the buttons below, and we'll see you all again next week. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.